Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 11 of the Watching Privacy Show. And we've got Brent and a special guest with us, Andrew, who's a privacy expert at a software company. And Raju's taking the week off, I guess, and we've subbed him with someone else with a mustache. So that worked out pretty well. And we can dive right in for the week. And actually, before we start, Andrew, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and so people have some context, and then we'll go into some of the news stories for the past week.
Sure. It's been quite a while since somebody asked me that question. It's usually asked in an HR interview, tell me about yourself. So I'm going to take the privilege of answering that in a different sense today. Okay, so I started off as an electronics and communications engineer. So that's